Okay, it's November 6th, and I've gone ahead and moved the Worm Factory 360 back outside because for the next 10 days, the weather in Nashville is at the low the 40s. Sometimes it's in the 80s during the day. So rather than fight the cats, and it's just kind of in the way where it's at in the kitchen with my son's virtual school. So I went ahead and brought it back outside, and I think that I'm going to add another tray today, which is why I have this one here, because I have kind of a big feeding to give them. But I'm also, this is probably the end. When I have to bring them back inside, I'm going to move them into like some big tote, and then that way they can live in the bathtub and just take them out when I need to take a shower for the winter, and then they can probably come back out here in about March. So let's take a look. I did peek today before I brought them out, and unlike the other day, there were quite a few worms on top. I bet they're not going to be here since I already peeked earlier, but there were a lot more worms on the top level then. There's a guy down in the paper. A lot more in this level than when I looked at the other day. I'm looking for the moisture level to see what it's like and how much of the bedding is left, how many black soldier fly larvae there are, and I really would like to do another feeding, so I'm just kind of trying to see if any of the feeding from the other day is floating around in here, because we have an indoor little bin that's getting pretty full, and I'd really like to put a lot of that in here today. So just kind of looking at the worms, I honestly think this level might be a little bit dry, but it's not, it's good and flaky, and it's going to get a feeding, and then we're really just out of space. So I'm going to have to move. There's a worm in there, I don't want to lose him. I'm going to have to move this up to, move it up a level. So it's still got the little black soldier fly larvae, and they like the avocado. So I brought a little cup out here so I could find the ones that I found in there. I don't know if, well, we'll see when we get to the second level, the first tray, I guess I should say. If I had my preference, I really would rather leave this outside all year. I'm really not too fond of bugs in the house, but we've had it inside now for at least a week, and it really wasn't nearly as bad as I thought. The problem is we have a bunch of cats, and they're super interested, so then it requires making sure that they are put up, because otherwise it's a battle to keep them out of it. So many worms moving around in the daylight, but it looks good. And they're really, other than this like avocado shell, there's really a whole bunch of larvae in my tea bag. So bye-bye. What I've read is that they just take over. Look how big that guy is. So I'm sure right now all the worms are moving down a level, but I'm gonna get them fed up and then add a new layer of shredded paper, a tray of shredded paper to the top. Just helps keep the bugs down, especially since they're back outside again. And then I think they'll be pretty happy. So far so good. I'm trying to remember, I think I might have made it 6 or 8 weeks last time when I got worms, and that time the one difference I did was I was pureeing all the food. This time I kind of decided not to do that. I've done a little bit different research. Not that I couldn't puree it, we've had so many scraps already that I've frozen the fruit, so to try to keep the bugs down, the fruit flies and all that kind of stuff. But other than that, yeah, I mean, again, I'm not 100% what I'm looking for. Sure, I'm not 100% sure what I'm looking for, but I feel like this looks really, really good. In terms of consistency, I don't see lots of This food I'm about to dump in here is like vile. It smells bad. So that means it's pretty decomposed, and the other day I feel like they went through it in about 3 days. So I've waited another 3 days because I didn't want to overfeed the bin. I'm sure I've done that in the past too. So I'm trying to be more patient, but they definitely, so this is kind of be a test. I'm going to put it, since the weather's going to be nice, I'm going to put a little bit more in here than I did last time, and we'll go from there. I was going to look and see if I saw any cocoons today. There's been tons in the bin below in the first tray. I haven't seen any, but I also haven't really been looking for them. I'm just looking more at food, and I do have a cocoon bin going separately. Look at that guy. So overall, super happy. Everyone's still alive here at Keeping Up with the Worms as far as I can tell. And really, some days, that's all I'm shooting for. I'm just gonna show, this is what the black soldier fly larvae look like in the first tray. I'm gonna hurry up and pick a whole bunch of them out. I've kind of learned if I don't do it fast, they disappear because they also don't like the light. And they burrow down in. So I'm gonna take a minute and do that. So I was just going to show the center of this tray is where the black fly larvae, soldier fly larvae seem to congregate. This is what I've picked out. I'll go back through and make sure there are any cocoons in there. There's cocoons already popping up down here though, which is nice to see. I didn't see as many in the, see 4 or 5. This layer's been covered in paper, newspaper, but you can see like kind of how low the level is, and that's partly from the weight of the tray above. And when I've been looking at reviews for the Worm Factory, that's really the criticism, is how heavy the trays get on top of each other, and then it really compresses and makes this more muddy than it needs to be, this compost. But I will say the worms seem happy. I just try to dig down in it and give it a little aeration every couple days. Again, I think I'm probably, when I know I'm gonna have to move this back inside, I'm probably gonna go ahead and make this the top tray and see if I can get these guys to migrate down into the 2 newer trays, and then go ahead and pretty much harvest this one. It's not, I think, what's considered perfect, but it's, yeah, look at all these guys down in here. It's just gonna get worse as more weight is added to it, and it's definitely a lot wetter than, yeah, definitely a lot wetter. Would need to dry out. There's still bedding and stuff in here. It's funny that I made him mad, I guess. Moved him around. So anyway, just kind of looking for any black soldier fly larvae to pull out, and also just in general, does it look like there's any food left in this tray? There's bedding, but I don't really see, and there's tons and tons of cocoons, but I don't see really any food left in here. There's just decomposing pieces of brown paper, which is what that was from an Amazon package. So, and as far as the black soldier fly larvae, I mean, really, I feel like all I can do is just try to pick out what I can and keep them from taking over. I don't know that there's really a way. My concern in bringing the bin inside for the winter is that they're going to hatch, and I'm going to have all these soldier flies, end of a banana. I'm going to have them all running around in my house. So that makes me a little bit nervous. But other than that, they're still laying plenty of cocoons. Pull that guy out. lots and lots of cocoons. There's a yellow one that's more freshly laid, a pinker one that's more closer to hatching. It's just like, that's been the super fun part of this. I really didn't know any of that when I've tried to do this before. And now that I can see it's working, and I see that the worms seem to be happy enough and thriving that they keep making more worms, then I feel pretty good about this experiment so far. And I definitely think for me it has helped. I knew I needed to either start with a lot more worms this time around, just because of how much food I was trying to compost, or I needed to have bigger worms that could go through more. So I think I'm probably going to end up having a bin of African night crawlers and a bin of red wigglers, which is what I'd had before, and then a bin of these guys, which are the European night crawlers. And I think once I get to that point, I'll be able to pretty much get rid of, on a weekly basis, the amount of food leftovers we have. And I've just learned more and more things that, you know, actually are compostable that I would have never thought that I could compost, like colored cardboard. I've seen the Crazy Worm Lady add that to her mix, and her worms have done absolutely fine. So those are some things I really stayed with. Completely unbleached products, no paper towels, no anything like that. But as I've been watching other channels and kind of seeing what they've been able to put in their vermicomposting bins, then I'm really excited to try some additional stuff. If we can, you know, not be throwing out white paper towels, I'd feel a lot better about buying them. So I think that's it for this. We'll do the feeding next. Okay, so I've gone ahead and made, I don't know if you can see it from this angle, I made a pretty good trench in the second tray. And I'm going to go ahead and add, even though there's bedding in here, this is a pretty wet feeding. So I'm going to add quite a bit of bedding just to kind of soak that up. And then I have a mix that I learned from the Crazy Worm Lady, and I think she uses oyster shell. I did buy some oyster shell, but I think it's fun to be able to use up eggshells too. So I went ahead and I'm going to make a separate video on what I've been doing with eggshells. So generally we don't put fruit in it, but I did freeze these grapes, and those are actually lemons. And I went ahead, I've been trying to use up, I'm terrible about eating grapes before they go bad. So I froze them first, and then put them in here to thaw. And this smells absolutely disgusting. Okay, I wish I could describe to you how horrible this smells. It's tomatoes. I think there might be a potato in there. Mostly coffee grounds, some tea bags. So it's a huge feeding, but they flew through it. It's been like simmering for forever, so it should break down really fast. I'm gonna go ahead and sprinkle some more of the mix on top of it. And my goal was to use up what was in there. So again, this is probably the biggest feeding I've ever done, maybe way too much, but it's also really dry up here on the top, and they flew. I did probably a third of this the other day. It was gone in 2 days. So I'm gonna give it a try, see what happens, and if it ends up being too much, then we'll just slow things down. And that's it for today. This is one of the other things I don't necessarily like about the Worm Bin 360. It leaves pretty significant gaps between the layers, and I feel like that just gets even more bugs in there. I don't know if you can see it. There we go. So I've kind of positioned the tray so that it's lined up, because the feeding is more on the side. I probably should have done it more down the middle. Look how, from this angle, you can see that the second tray is leaning in on the right side. So you really have to try to get them level to start with. That's something that, again, not a super big fan of this Worm Factory 360. I think it sounds like a great idea, and it just doesn't play out as well as it's positioned. So I was just going to show, this is about how many black soldier fly larvae I pull out each time, which really is like every couple days. And I think as long as they're not, you know, taking over. I'm assuming that pulling them out is helping. And just kind of looking at, like, my next step is to kind of figure out that teeny tiny one down there. Oh, I can't point. My hope is that I can just keep the population down. But again, it's one of those things where keeping a worm bin requires more maintenance than maybe you would think, because there's little pests that you're trying to balance out. I've been tossing them in the yard, and I wonder now if tossing them in the yard is maybe not the best bet, because they then hatch a fly who comes back and lays more eggs, which then become larvae. So yeah, I need to research and figure out what exactly I'm supposed to be doing with these guys. But so far, I've kept the mites down quite a bit with the mix I've been using of diatomaceous earth, kelp, neem. I bought neem leaves just because they were $10 instead of $30 to see what difference it would make, and I definitely think it dropped the amount of mites. I was seeing tons and tons of red mites, but I also have not been feeding a whole lot of fruits either right now, which they're super attracted to. And eggshell. That's the 4 pieces that are in there. And you can even see, you know, all the little white pieces now are some of that eggshell in there. So this is kind of my, I don't want to say nemesis. It's part of the ecosystem, and I think better than a bug. What I don't want is for it to just take over and lose all the worms. So that's kind of the just ongoing, how can I keep it under control?